I mean, it is a bubble, obviously. Is OpenAI worth the gazillions of dollars people say? Probably not.
No. Is AI going to solve our productivity problem? Diane Coyle is an economist and professor at the University of Cambridge. Her new book is called The Measure of Progress, Counting What Really Matters.
So I think it's going to be quite a long time before we see the use of AI translating to big increases in productivity. I think I should hit that button because maybe we need to talk about what that means.
Go on, hit it first of all. It's very... I want to start with something that Keir Starmer said. He said that he wants to make the UK a champion of AI. Do you think that that's something that we should aspire to do, first of all?
I think it depends what you mean by champion of AI. We are really good in this country at frontier AI research. There are some fantastic people in the universities. So if you think about how can we make this an export success and create great jobs for people and upskill people, then that's a really sensible aspiration. We've only got one big company. It's DeepMind. It's owned by Google. So can we grow from those university researchers some companies that are producing really useful services that people want to pay for and we can export them? That's a great aspiration. There's another side to it, which is using the AI created by the big American tech companies. And I'm much more hesitant about how that's playing out because there are people saying this is going to completely reform our public services, but they're short of money, but this will fix that. And I don't think that's true at all. And I've got a lot of reservations about the way that's being done. DeepMind does incredibly exciting frontier AI. It did the program that beat the world champion at Go, so it's tested it all on games. But it does things like protein folding, which is a way of understanding how molecules in medicines are going to behave. It's got the best weather forecaster in the world through an algorithm it's devised. So it's doing really fantastic kinds of research. The other companies we've got are startups. So they're all really fantastic too, but they're tiny and they're not in that sort of stage of commercial maturity where we see lots of jobs and lots of growth coming out of them.
Do you think the UK has that potential to deliver commercial growth and big AI companies?
I do, except the trouble is all the startups want to be bought out by Google or the big tech companies because that's the easy way to make your money out of it.
Yeah.
So we could, but I think it will take a little bit of work to make it happen.
You said that you're worried that it's not going to deliver the productivity shift that people think it will.
Yeah, well, think about what it is. It's a information technology. It's a way of collecting up a whole load of information that is gathered from the internet and other sources of data and using that to help people make better decisions or predict things. And that means that companies and other organizations have to figure out how to use it. So you've got all this new information. How have you got the data? What data are you giving access to help you make your decisions better? How are you going to change your organization so that you can use that information to do things better? What does that mean about accountability and hierarchies? So, for example, there are loads of great startups in health tech using AI. They can do things like, help doctors write letters more easily or provide information to nurses on the ward more easily. Does that nurse then have the authority to make a decision about something, or will they still have to go to the doctor who's busy in the ward down the corridor to get the approval to make the decision? So there's a lot of restructuring that gets done. People have to learn how to use it. They've particularly got to get the data in shape. And most organizations don't have the data that they need. You can't match tabs, different formats. You're worried about GDPR and regulation. You're worried about data security. So I think it's going to be quite a long time before we see the use of AI translating to big increases in productivity. You said productivity. I think I should hit that button because maybe we need to talk about what that means.
Go on, hit it first of all. It's nice.
It's very satisfying, isn't it?
It's like cathartic. But go on and define.
Well, politicians are talking about this all the time. People in business don't use the term. What we economists mean is it's what you get out for what you put in. So given the resources that you have, the people you hire, the equipment, everything else, paying for electricity and all of that, how does that help you produce an output that your customers or users are going to value, and if you're in business, that they're going to pay for? So it's what you put in at one end, how do you use it, and what do you get out that's valuable at the other end.
Are there certain characteristics of technology that make it, you could look at it and go, this is going to improve productivity?
I would always look for how much time is it going to save. If you look back at a lot of technologies in history, what they fundamentally did is save a lot of time in the process.
Washing machines.
Washing machines, great example, although they don't count in the formal economy that we measure because it's household use.
Right.
But arguably, one of the most important innovations of the 20th century because of all the time it saved from washing clothes by hand. But steamships versus sailing ships would be another example. Or the just-in-time revolution in manufacturing in the 1970s, which was about making the assembly line work in a much more efficient way. Similarly, that would be how AI does improve productivity if it's going to do it.
Because I was surprised to read that 5 to 10% of companies admitted to being able to use AI. The rest were like, we don't really know what to do with it or how to use it.
Yeah, the numbers vary depending on the survey, but it's definitely a minority. And, it is quite hard to figure out in many businesses what you would do. If you're thinking about ChatGPT summarizing things, that's okay. Lawyers use it and accountants use it. Sometimes that gets them into trouble because it makes things up. It's called hallucinations. And so the information's inaccurate. But many companies, never mind AI, they don't really know what to do with digital. You've got to have the mind space and the time and also enough workers with skills to start to use these new technologies. And it's only 5 to 10% that have seen their productivity go up because of previous digital technology, never mind AI.
How long do you think it will take before we start to see productivity improvements?
That's a big question. I think we ought to stake something on it and reconvene in 10 years' time.
Okay,
I'm going to say 10 years.
10 years, 10 years. And what will that look like, do you think? There's another big bet to make. Like, are we all going to be on universal income because the robots have replaced all of our jobs? Or is it just going to be that?
No, I don't think that. It's really hard to do that kind of forecast. If you, again, look back, electricity took about 50 years to have an effect on productivity. And that required people to get away from the tall factories that you see in Manchester or Glasgow, which were built around one steam engine or two steam engines. And you laid out flat factories like the Ford plant at Dagenham because the assembly line could have an electric motor on each machine. So you had to completely rebuild that. And they were in different places, so that meant building houses there. So you started to get the suburban growth that we saw in the 20th century. And then you got domestic appliances, which completely revolutionized home life and allowed women to go into the workforce. So that sort of long-term big picture is really hard to predict from this end of a technological revolution. So I'm not going to place a bet on that.
But you do think it is a technological revolution?
I probably do, yes.
You think,
probably do.
Like the internet, like that kind of scale?
Like printing, like the internet, a big information technology
That's
change.
nice to hear. Because you do worry, like, are we just all sipping the Kool-Aid a bit or getting a bit carried away?
A little bubble and it's going to be, no one's talking about it in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But you can get both. It is bubble, obviously. Mm-hmm. Is OpenAI worth the gazillions of dollars people say? Probably not.
No.
But then after the bubble burst, the technology's still there.
We've spoken before about enshittification and this idea. I mean, we can hit the button if we want. But
Damien's favourite word.
Two in the first half
I think
an hour.
That's sort of good Anglo-Saxon phrase. You can figure that out.
Yeah. But we've seen. So if we look at some of the big tech movements, so Google has clearly got worse in the past few years in terms of the search results are poor and there's more ads. Uber, I think, is a classic example of a service that seemed to be like they've improved taxis. Now I would just rather have a black cab, honestly, when I'm in London. Do we think AI will just go that way, where it promises to be everything and then a few parties will control it and just make it crap for everyone?
It's possible. I think it depends on whether this time around the competition authorities in the different countries are on the ball, because they weren't in that previous wave, and it's why we've only got the handful of big tech companies dominating everything, and they are then able to get away with the enshittification. I think there's more chance of stopping it this time. OpenAI is obviously a different player. There's a company called Anthropic. There's a French company called Mistral. I think there's more hope as well from different versions of the technology, because these big, large language models are really energy hungry. They cost a fortune to train. And so the technological people are working on, can we do it more cheaply, more efficiently? Can we use a different approach to building much smaller models? And if that happens, then you get much more competition and you don't get that kind of phenomenon.
A lot of people are building on top of them as well. So you might get, it's like powered by ChatGPT, but they've narrowed down the use case. I don't know if Perplexity is ChatGPT or not, but I use that a lot. And do you think it could be, they could almost be like base layers and we see lots of different types of applications built on top, almost like an iPhone with apps?
That's certainly true, and that would be much more competitive. But there's a level at which you're not going to get competition. So these data centers are huge and costly, and you don't like water infrastructure or something. You're not going to have competition there. So there will always be some level at which there are people who are gatekeepers to the technology.
You said you were writing, at the beginning, you said you were writing a paper on the laws of, what do you call it?
Governance is the
Governance,
You better hit the button.
Go on.
Yes. Paper on the governance of AI, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the fears or negatives you have about AI? Because I see it all the time with these fake AI videos, and now it's got so bad that you see something on social media and people are like, oh, that's AI. And then someone else was like, not everything you see is AI. So now people are getting so skeptical that they're like, oh, it's a fake video, it's AI, because the AI is getting so good at fake videos. So what do you think are some of the dangers of AI?
Well, that's obviously one of the misinformation broadly, fakes, really big concern. And who knows what effects that's been having already. We've not really got a handle on that. Invasion of privacy, and that takes subtle forms as well, because if I post some information, it reveals information about my family and friends or about people who like me. So there are a lot of concerns about privacy. The concerns we just talked about who's actually getting better off as a result of this, and sure, we get free search or some free AI, but at some cost. And then just broader questions, I think, about who's in control of society. And it's really striking to me that things that used to be seen as really central to what governments do are being outsourced to private tech companies. Things like identity systems or the operating system for a lot of the public sector is sitting on Amazon Cloud. That's really striking. It's a real difference. These are things that governments have always sought to be in charge of. And so there's a question, not a day-to-day question, but fundamentally a question about who runs society. There are the economists like me who go, oh, we're not measuring this properly, and oh, what's the effect going to be on jobs and productivity? And then there's a political discussion. And somehow joining up these things is what I think is going to be important to make this amazing technology work for us. And a lot of it comes down to power. We've got these huge technology companies. We've got multi-billionaires. They're buying elections. They're running governments. So the missing bit for me is we're not actually talking about those power relations. And how does that play into the economics conversation and the technical conversation? So what I want to do is to get people in each of these little silos to look outwards and pay attention to what's going on.
Do you think there can also be an element of scaremongering around it? Could there be that we overcompensate and we stifle the evolution of it by coming in, regulating it heavily? Because this is what they will probably say, won't they?
They would say that. And I think what they're most concerned about is being forced to compete and being forced to operate in a way that would allow others to come in with better technology, in the way that Facebook back in the day overtook MySpace because it had a better platform. And it's really hard to see that happening now. So that's definitely what they will say. Could there be an overreaction? I mean, sure, but I think that partly depends on how the companies behave. And if they do carry on degrading and shitifying all of these services that we have loved, then that's more likely. The backlash will get all the more severe, and that means that there is more likely to be overreaction.
I love that the inshitify is the accepted term.
It was the word of the year in one of the big dictionaries.
Yeah.
Should we tell the people what it is, just in case they don't know?
We already have.
Not in this episode.
I mean, it's the enshitification of something. It's making it worse intentionally.
There you go.
Normally with the attempt to make profit, to improve profitability.
Mm-hmm.
One of the worst things that I see in my world is scammers who pretend to be me or the podcast and then try and get money out of people who follow us. And sadly, these scammers are getting better and better by the day. which is one of the reasons that we're really happy that we're partnering up with Vanta, who help businesses be secure and then prove that they're secure. Vanta automates compliance for stuff like GDPR, ISO 27001, SOC 2 and more, helping businesses build customer trust. The beauty of Vanta is they save companies a lot of time and money because proving you're secure without them really is an enormous faff. It can take months of work and form filling. Over 9,000 companies like Atlassian, Flow Health and Cora use Vanta to manage their risk and prove their security in real time. If you need to prove that your business is secure and compliant, you can get $1,000 off by going to vanta.com/makingmoney. I've left a link in the description for you.
You recently wrote about time tax. Can you tell us what that means, please? And can we ever talk about that?
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit earlier about one of the good things about technology is saving people time to do things they really want to do. And modern life taxes us with time because we sit in voicemail queues trying to get through to a human being to fix the problem for us. Or in the supermarket, we no longer have somebody scanning the groceries. We've got to do it ourselves and the machines don't work properly. So that takes time. So all of these things that are taxing our time for the profit of different companies, and they might look like they're improving productivity. Those companies will be doing better, but we are paying not a monetary price, but a time price for it. So the good thing about the tech will be if it starts saving us time instead of costing us time.
Yeah, like ads, right? I kick off at these guys in here when we put YouTube on and there's an ad. I'm like, your time has a value. I pay for the subscription just to get rid of the ads. But I think that's another way that
you sound very impatient.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. No, I just.
No, you value your time.
I value my time.
I wouldn't say impatient. You value your time.
I think most people don't. Yeah. They don't realise that that's like the hardest currency they've got and that it disappears. And yeah.
I think we economists ought to think much more about it. And, we always calculate in money. But as you say, we've got 24 hours a day. You've got to spend it all. So we should be focusing on how do you do that productively in work and how do you do it enjoyably when you're not in work?
I think what made me realise it was that because of YouTube, what I do, on the back end of YouTube, I can see how many hours people spend watching my content. You're talking like hundreds of thousands of hours. Some videos can be tens and thousands of hours. And I work it out and I'm like, 200 lifetimes a year watching my content.
Amazing.
Mr. Beast is hundreds of millions of views a video. Thousands of people's lifetimes a week are watching his content. You literally mine the attention like it's a commodity, and they do that by slapping ads in front of it. And I think when you see it in that way, you start to realize like this has real value. I might watch a 10-minute video, but if 100 million people watch that video, the productivity loss, if it's not something that helps people, if it's just him running around like, giving away money, it's massive. I feel
the same for social media. Like Damon knows I've got an app that blocks my social media because I look on every week and it says, you spent 2 hours on Instagram today, you spent 1 hour. And I'm like, I could have done so much in that 1 hour and I learned very little. And I just was, because it sucks you in into the
It's deeply addictive, isn't it?
Yeah, they want you to just keep scrolling eternally. There's no end to it. So I'm like, I'm going to go to bed early tonight, get into bed at 11. And I'm like, why am I still on Instagram at midnight? So I just block the apps. But I feel like they all have a way, TikTok, Instagram, to suck you in. And
they were designed by the guys who built Vegas, weren't they? And my biggest worry about AI is we turn the best humans against everyone in terms of attention. And now we're going to design an AI that will know us even better than we ourselves. And it's just going to become so efficient at grabbing your attention that we'll find it like, it'll be like heroin trying to pull your phone away from your face.
There was a novel called Brave New World, which drugged people into just, being passive and happy with everything. And we've devised that. But the drug is the social media scroll, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although I do sometimes find that when I've seen enough videos of hamsters being cute or whatever, I go, what am I doing?
Yeah.
That's it. It's when you have a moment of clarity, you're like, what am I? Because they show me basketball, then they'll show me like someone in a bikini, then they'll show me like football, then they'll show me...
Very different algorithms, YouTube. Hamster in a bikini, look, hamster playing basketball.
I'm not in charge of Instagram's algorithm. That's just what they show everyone.
Oh, sure. You are in charge of what they show you.
No, because on my new Instagram page, which I literally only follow people that have been on the podcast, they still show me like random girls in bikinis, and I do not follow...
Yeah, because they get, they're like, people tend to like random girls in bikinis, Ronaldo or cakes. Yeah. So take your pick.
But it's like brand new account and they're just showing me all these things to keep me sucked. I was like, I'm only going to follow professionals, and still they're showing me the same like on nonsense that's just dragging me in. So yeah, it's a bit annoying.
Okay, the good question. I think we've been a bit negative. Where do you see the biggest impacts in terms of positivity over the next 10 years?
Oh, there's some amazing potential. Already being seen in science discovery, new medications, solutions for people who've got disabilities. The Neuralink stuff, which is scary because it's Elon Musk, has got great potential for people who've got neurodegenerative diseases. So there's a whole swathe of potentially fantastic medical things that could come out of this. I talked about the weather forecasting, and in a time of climate change, producing extreme weather stuff, that's going to be really important. So all of that kind of scientific domain, I think there's huge potential. Probably also in the kind of organisational improvements that allow us to get conventional economic productivity, because it will help people in lots of jobs that are quite routine, automate the boring bits, automate the routine bits. So in my work, we don't do it very much at the moment. I mean, some academics use it to try to generate ideas or titles for their papers, but we're experimenting. Part of our research is looking at policy documents, and normally you get a research assistant to read them and summarise them and pull out the important points, so it's been human. We're experimenting with getting ChatGPT to do that, and that means that if it can be reliable, you can look at thousands of policy documents, so you can expand the scope of what you're doing. In firms like lawyers or accountants, you can see the potential for that to really improve their productivity by automating the more routine things that they do. So I do think there's a lot of amazing potential, but the questions are what kind of things we've been talking about, really, including, can you trust it? Is it reliable enough?
Can it drive itself into the floor with inaccuracy?
It's what the technical people call model collapse.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get enough new information and correction, then that happens. And so there's something called reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is exactly about people going, oh, that's really stupid, let's correct that, and it improves next time around.
And one thing I wanted to talk to you about around this was the incentive to make the AIs look more sophisticated than they are. I'll give you an example. There was the Amazon shop where people could just walk in and grab something off the shelf and walk out and it would charge them. And then they realized that they just had people in India following everyone around on cameras. Do you feel that there's an incentive from big tech to make it look like their AI offerings are more compelling than they actually are?
Well, there's a huge hidden human input into all of these models, and it all started with the image labeling, which was done by people in low-income countries being paid not very much to label images, so the AI could learn from that.
And when you say the labeling, they're saying this is a car, this is a bike.
Or we do it when you've got to prove that you're a human, and you label.
You have to click on the
pictures. You have to click on the buses,
the captcha
whatever
stuff.
Yeah. We're training AIs.
I was going to say, can't AI do that? Because that's meant to prove that you're human.
Well, they keep getting harder. You see how the captures, that it gets harder and harder because the AI gets smarter and smarter.
But then it turns out I'm not human because I can't do it.
Right?
Yeah,
That's what, because I'm like, which one? I'm on my phone, I'm like, which one's a bicycle? I can't see, it's so small. So
And the layers of them, it gets, you have to do 10 of them to get in, to log into stuff. Yeah, this is something I want to talk to you about without sounding crazy. Does the AI get so smart that it's smarter than us? Do we hit a point of like a singularity? Am I going to live forever? Is what I'm really interested in.
He just wants to invest.
Those are different questions.
Yeah. I mean, this is the outcome I want. What I want is in the next 20 years for it to just figure out everything and, to cure death, and then I can live forever.
Well, it's really interesting. We evaluate the AI by how good it is compared to humans at doing certain things. Which is slightly weird because we'd really want the technology to be good at things that we're not good at doing.
Yeah. And
so previous machines were good at lifting heavy weights because we're limited in how much we can lift.
I'm not.
It's all that Instagram that you watch.
Oh, man, I watched that one.
So it will get better than at some things than we are. And that's all the cognitive skills. And, what's new about that? Computers are already better at sums than I am. I don't think it's anywhere near being as good as we are at things that are hard to write in computer code. Nowhere near. And that's all of the haptic stuff.
Oh. taking my job now. I'm going to have
Sorry.
the job soon.
Which is
AI.
movement and how, being able to tell how close you are to a surface. So that's merging AI with robotics. That will come, probably not quickly, but I'm looking forward to the washing machine equivalent that will do my folding the clothes up for me and all of that.
Oh, pairing your socks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or finding your socks.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think they all go missing in the washing machine. Like, I think that's a
Yeah.
secret hole where they all
There
just
is.
sneak.
That's the price we pay for the washing machine.
Yeah,
We feed it socks.
I'm taking 10% of your socks every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there are all kinds of emotional things as well. And if you think of an example like nursing, there are things that would be great that the AI would do. So it would be great if the nurse doesn't have to stand at a computer terminal with their back to the patient typing things in. The AI can record that and sum it up. That would be fantastic. There are things that you want to happen quickly. Blood tests, really boring, pretty straightforward. Can we speed that up? Or, lots of routine things. Can we speed those up? That should free the time of the medical staff to really pay attention to you, or to give you much better quality care, to empathise with you.
To be more human.
To be more human.
I love that.
To be more human.
Yeah.
So all of that should be freed up
Yeah.
by the technology.
It's never going to replace us as humans. I say this all the time in what I do with content. The advantage is to lean to being more human. Everyone is like, how can I make 1 million pieces of content using AI? And I'm like, that's a mistake, because you'll just get generic bad content.
Yeah.
Ask ChatGPT to crack a joke. It's pretty awful,
Yeah. And I say to students, you can use ChatGPT, but that'll get you a B. If you want to be a good student, you've got to use the stuff in your head.
Some things it's really good. Like I have client calls on Zoom, and I just click AI. I pay for it. It's like AI assistant, and it just like summarizes the whole call and then emails it to everyone. So if you forget something, normally I used to just write all the notes while I'm on the Zoom. Now I can just drive, sit back, talk to them, and then it just summarizes everything. Makes a few mistakes, but it kind of notes everything important. So it's pretty good.
I do both. So you get the summary, and it doesn't always pick out the things that I would pick out.
Yeah.
So I've got a notebook as well, and
That's
I
right,
write down the ones that I want to remember.
Exactly, yeah.
One of the pillars of personal finance is having an emergency fund so that you can withstand financial shocks. But the value of holding on to lots of cash beyond that is questionable, because it just gets eaten away by inflation. You should put that money to work, and really the same goes for any money that's in your business. There's an amount you want to hold in your business account to ensure that you can weather any storms, but then you want to put the rest of the money to work, and where should you do that? I use Tide's Instant Saver account for this scenario, and they're offering new customers 3.81% AER variable on unlimited deposits until June 1st, 2025. I even use it for stuff like putting all my tax money in, so my up and coming VAT bill, I stick it in there so I can generate a little bit of a return on it in the meantime. If you'd like to give it a go, then use the code MAKINGMONEYQ1 and you'll get £100 if you add £5,000 in the first 30 days. There's a link in the description for you where you can also find a link to the full T's and C's and Tides terms. The variable rate is correct as of the 6th of February 2025.
I hope it has potential for fact checking. People talk about misinformation and how they think it will create it. I hope it's the other way, where we have these tools where we can kind of check the validity of what we're seeing through the AI.
Well, the kind of people who do that work, that fact-checking work, I think are definitely using the tools to do that. But that, that's quite a lot of skill. People like Bellingcat, they're very skilled. So if we can automate that so everybody can figure out what's true and what's not, that would be fantastic.
Do you have areas of, would you say there's certain job roles where you think you need to probably reskill, or you might be under threat from this?
People talk about roles like paralegals who do all the boring sifting through documents and document summaries. And so those jobs will change in character. The question is it going to be like driving a horse-drawn carriage, where you've got to completely reskill to become a driver? Or is it like, working in a bank where people thought automatic tellers would put all the people behind the counters out of business? And it certainly hasn't. They're just doing different things.
Or it means like a power armor suit. They can lift more. They can do more. So that paralegal ends up doing thousands of cases at once rather than one.
Yeah.
That could be.
That could be.
Yeah.
It'll certainly reshape the jobs people do and the skills that are needed.
But you think this is a few years away before we see it on a level?
It'll be gradual, I would guess. I mean, the companies that are using AI, the big ones who are improving productivity, they're actually employing more people and they're paying really good wages. So at the moment, it's a good news story. it also might help the ones who are kind of less skilled or less well paid, because the experiments so far show that what the AI does is it takes all of the stuff that the best people in the company know, and it helps the people who are not so good use that and improve. So it's actually squeezing together the wage distribution in some call centres and that kind of company. So far it's been a good news story in the labour market. The worry is if it starts to speed up, our experience with previous waves of automation is pretty rubbish at retooling people. So if you think about automation in the 80s and 90s and the deindustrialisation in the Midlands and the north of England that happened because of that, we were just terrible at giving people skills to do new kinds of jobs.
Yeah, the knocker-uppers, remember I told you about? The guy, before the alarm clock, there was guys that would
they knock on your window.
They would have a pole and they'd rattle on your window and
Yeah.
they lost their jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know who woke them up, but, you know. Okay, so I want to move now into the measurement of this and the ways that we do that, because you've got some quite interesting views around GDP and how we should look at measuring the productivity side of things. Is this what your new book's going to focus on?
So the new book is about going beyond GDP, which is a kind of phrase people have been using, recognising that GDP, gross domestic product, the monetary economy, doesn't capture all of the things that we care about. So part of the book is we're really not measuring at all of this digital stuff that's going on. We don't know what the cost of cloud computing is. So any company knows its bill, but constructing a price index like the price of food that the Office of National Statistics produces, we've not got that. We don't know enough about all of the components that are coming into the country to make things before they get exported again. All of that's enabled by digital networks, and we're not measuring what's going on. The kinds of companies that are providing services as well as manufacturing, we just, there's a whole swathe of things about the modern economy that we're just not measuring. So that's a chunk of it. That means it's really hard to understand what's happening to productivity. And it's not been growing very much at all in this country for ages. A lot of that is for really solid reasons, like the infrastructure is crumbling and the health services crumbling, so people are suffering ill health and not working as much as they could. But some of it is just measurement. We're not measuring what's happening. But the other bit is, well, what should we be doing? And part of it is we should be looking at how people spend their time at work and at home. And part of it is thinking about, well, what do you need to make the economy thrive and to give people productive lives with a good income and upskill them? And I see that in terms of what do you need access to? You need access to the skills and education. You need access to clean air and good environment. You need access to the infrastructure. You need access to capital machinery. So think about that sort of balance sheet of all the things that the economy needs for people to get on and lead the kind of lives they want to lead. So in the jargon, it's called inclusive wealth. It's like adding a balance sheet to the GDP accounts, just as any company would have a balance sheet as well as a profit and loss to tell you about, is its business model sustainable over the long term? And so it's that analogy at the level of the country, of the economy as a whole. So things like policies around home working or childcare need to know much more than they do. How much are people working at home actually? We've not got those statistics. So there are just so many areas where to devise policies that actually help people rather than making things more difficult for them, we've not got the statistics we need. And that's really why it matters.
And what do you think about measures, say, around satisfaction and happiness of the population instead as like a measure of growth?
They don't seem very useful to me. Of course, we want people to be happy and we care about that. So it's good to know what's happening. But you can't affect it directly in the way that you can by giving people good housing. Mm-hmm. So this is the measurements for me are a tool for running the country, for running businesses. And so I'm happy if people are getting happier, and it's good to know. It's difficult to measure. There's a lot of dispute about how to do it. And it's not useful in the way that statistics need to be.
Pretty subjective as well. If you catch someone on a good day, they might say they're happy, and then the next day they might say they're sad.
Well, they're usually scales 1 to 10, and mostly people are 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So
Really?
yeah.
I'm always a 9. or 10.
That's great.
Except for when I sit in this chair too
Yeah,
long, then
the
I'm like a
chairs
4
are
because
brutal.
my back's working.
They're
But
brutal.
normally I'm a 9 or 10.
Well,
Unless my car breaks down, then I'm like a 1.
I'm really short, so these chairs are working for me.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Could I give you an example then of a shift that we've seen in our lifetimes, and you explain to us how you would measure the productivity of that using what you've just said. So I was reading a book the other day, and it talked about how when people gained access to iPhones, the amount of pictures they could take exploded. And what we saw was a decline in digital camera sales, printed photos. So the GDP dropped in that sense because people aren't doing the old style of taking photos, but you get an explosion through this medium. And to say, well, productivity's gone down, actually, we're far more productive in terms of the amount of photos we take, the enjoyment we get out of them and stuff. How would you measure that?
Well, that's a great example of what we're not measuring.
Yeah.
And it's not completely lost because some of that will show up in sales of iPhones and the wages paid to people who work for Apple or in Apple stores. So it doesn't vanish completely, but that substitution away from cameras to photos on a device, we're not capturing it. And the last estimate I saw of the value of all the apps you've got on a phone is 2 million euros.
That's what I mean.
Was the figure?
All the devices.
So all of the stuff that are now on that phone. And obviously we pay for our data plans and the phone and the electricity to charge it.
Yeah.
But we're not paying for all of that.
It makes them actually seem like quite reasonable. And when you say that they're worth
bargain.
£2 million,
Get a new iPhone for like a grand.
but
It's
then when
like,
you
what's
think
a
about
bargain?
it, I've got a dictaphone, I've got a compass, I've got like a record player,
Got a torch.
a torch, yeah,
Music player,
yeah, like hundreds of devices,
calculator, everything.
yeah, hundreds of devices consolidated into one thing.
And then think of the entertainment that gives you through watching those lovely Instagram videos, all the time it saves you by not getting lost.
You say
you've got your
calling him out
GPS.
for watching porn.
I just stopped.
It feels like you're talking about porn. So how do you measure that then? Like, I get why we're losing it, but how do we say, okay, let's quantify that value?
Don't know.
No.
Don't know.
Do we just abandon GDP and say that it's not useful? We need to figure another way.
I think you need to know the amount of money sloshing around the economy so that the Bank of England can set interest rates and the Chancellor can think about how much tax and spend to do. So it's not that it's useless. But we haven't answered the questions about what is it that's really creating value for people in this economy. So the next book that you mentioned goes partway towards that, but I think there's still a lot of unsolved questions. So what is it that you're buying actually? It's not the device. The device is a kind of window onto things that we would value. You need the telephone network and the Wi-Fi for that to work, but that's not what we value either. It's the content that we value. And somehow it's Apple that's getting the money.
Yeah.
And so how do you think about what's the kind of true economic value creation, and then how do you think about how that gets distributed?
Yeah, one thing is it's the efficiency and the time again, isn't it? An Apple device can in one way suck a lot of time from you, but it gives you a lot of time back in the sense of I don't need to go rummaging for a torch. I've just got it there, and that's the value to me. The calculator, it's all those devices in my hand.
It's a really complicated calculus, so I don't know that it's possible to answer that.
No. And, other things in the Western world, we spend a lot of money on services that are quite soft. And the value I get from my society is taking my son to the park and like having a nice time there. And how do you measure that,
Well, I think you could try to measure that. I did a study looking at how much people do value these free digital services. And you do it by saying, if we took them away from you for a month, how much would we have to pay you? And we threw in some non-digital things like TV programs and the park. And actually, the park is up there. People do value parks the way they value access to search or social media or online shopping. So there are techniques for doing that. We're just not doing it systematically. Mm-hmm. And once you start doing it for digital, that does mean you open the question about, well, shall we do that for schools and hospitals and parks and all of those free, quotes, free goods? which we're paying for in different ways.
That's a really good point, because in lockdown, that's the first time people
got
really
really
realised, they're
aware
like,
then, yeah.
oh, I'm going to go to the supermarket for the 4th time today because that's the only place I'm allowed to go. But like they miss going to the park or just going for a walk or just being outdoors. You don't value it until it's taken away from you.
Completely by chance, we did the first survey in February 2020, and then lockdowns happened, and we thought, that's handy. So we did it again. We did it again in May 2020, and you could see the kind of changes you'd expect. So people stopped valuing...
You don't know what you've got until it's gone.
Valuing Uber and Citymapper, and they started valuing parks and online groceries.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask them was, with GDP actually, how did we end up with it?
We ended up with GDP because of the Second World War. People had started to try to sum up the economy beforehand because of the Depression, when people for the first time expected governments to try and do something to fix it. But it was the need for governments in the Second World War to understand what the capacity of their economy was to produce stuff, what was the minimum they needed for people to consume, and what was left for the war effort. And that sort of figure wasn't available. So Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, famous economist, came up with this structure, and it was implemented in the US and the UK. The Germans had their own similar effort on the statistics, but that was another bit of the war where we were ahead of them. And it was just incredibly helpful in managing the economy. But that model then got carried over in post-war years. And the Cold War played a part as well, because wanting to grow faster than the Soviets and beat them on, domestic appliances and the wealth of life helped stimulate the need for economic growth and monitoring GDP all the time. So it came from a very specific set of circumstances, and when manufacturing was the dominant thing in the economy, and it was much easier to think about how do you add that all up together.
So you think it was of the time almost?
I think it was of the time, and the times are changing.
Yeah. And if you had better tools now to measure this, do you think that you would report AI as a drag or a positive in its current form on productivity, GDP?
Probably a drag at the moment.
Wow. Because it's sucking up so much in resources, or
It's taking up so much resource. And certainly if you accounted for the energy use and the climate impacts of energy use and the materials impact of energy use, it would be a drag.
Yeah. Do you think then that all of this money and all of this effort that we're pouring into AI, you kind of already answered it, but do you think it's going to be a net positive for the world in the long run?
Eventually. I mean, technological change is what's driven economic growth, and more importantly, longer lives, healthier lives, better quality of life over the very long term. So eventually it will be.
Did you see it coming, the AI boom? I think for Civvy Street, it seemed like someone flipped a switch and it was like, here you go. And everyone was like, oh my God, this thing's pretty useful. Were you like...
Sort of did. But even the people who run these models were surprised at the sudden increase in their capabilities in 2022.
I use it every day, which I think is pretty telling. I use Google less and less, and I use these AI models, and I've got about 5 that I use. But yeah, I input loads.
Google search now gives you an AI summary anyway.
Yeah, it does at the top.
I
noticed that.
Although I worry about that because it uses so much more energy than my Google search underneath it.
What, are you tracking the energy usage?
Well, I just know, but I know that it uses much more to do that AI summary than it does to do an ordinary search return.
Oh, really? And there's some, like, if I want a quick answer, I'll go to ChatGPT. If I want to go and see a few different opinions, I'll go to Google. So they serve a different kind of search function. Do you know what I mean? You can go through them and it's not curated like that. Whereas I think if you get a spat out answer at the top, you're inclined to just believe it and off you go.
And the thing that everybody's working on now is doing it by voice. So your Alexas or whatever you have will be able to do that for you. So you can just ask the question and it will come back with whatever you want.
And Siri won't answer. Siri's so bad.
Do you think that's going to affect businesses though? Because obviously you go onto Google, you search for something, and a lot of the time it's a business advertising like their services, but they write an article so that the search term leads you to their website. But now if Google's just like, here's your AI answer, then all the companies that are paying for Google ads or that want you to come to their website aren't going to be seen because you're just looking at the AI answer.
The PPC model gets threatened, doesn't it? The pay-per-click. What's the incentive when they're just spitting out? They're almost eating their own business model to provide an AI response.
It's a good example of what is called the innovator's dilemma in the business literature, that, you're an incumbent, you're the most powerful company doing what you do, and this new thing comes along that does something different. Do you ignore it and get left behind, or do you cannibalize your own business model and stay with it?
Blockbuster you sit there. I mean, there's the story of the tights that didn't rip and they bought them and shelved the recipe. I don't know if it's true, but it's that kind of thing, isn't it? What do you think that they should do?
What should Google do?
Yeah, what should Google do in the face of, they've got probably one of the best business models ever invented,
Yes.
and now it's under threat. What should they do?
I think I would charge Google a lot of money to give the answer to that question.
Yeah, okay, that's a great answer.
We talk about a lot of stuff on the podcast, so we just wanted to make it really easy for you to know what the key levers to building wealth are. That's why we've put together a free summary, which is 80% of what you need to know about personal finances on 2 pages. If you want this free guide, there's a link in the description.